You following this order?
Not necessarily. All right, good morning. I'm going to call Commerce to order and immediately put it into recess for 5 minutes. We're waiting on an amendment for one of the bills we're going to vote on this morning. So we are in recess until 9:35. Yeah, a little bit. All right, good morning, everyone. I'll call Commerce out of recess. And just by way of overview, before we go into executive session, we have a number of bills that we're going to vote on this morning to move on out of committee. We have several bills for hearings this morning, beginning at about 10 a.m. Some of those may involve a lot of testimony, so I just want to alert everybody, it's possible that some of the bills scheduled for today might be pushed back to next week, though we will try to get through all of them this morning if we can. So just for your planning purposes. So do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
All right, second? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are in executive session. And I would like to open the discussion on Senate Bill 164. This is an act relative to homeowners and prohibiting certain types of service agreements. As I understand it, there's an amendment to this. Senator Ricciardi, Senator Reardon, if you would like to speak to that.
This amendment addresses some of the concerns when there was testimony given that the realtors had. And this amendment simply fixes those concerns.
Okay. Senator Reardon, anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will say I raised some concerns at the time of the public hearing. The amendment does move the bill to a better spot.
Yeah.
But I think this is unconscionable that these service agreements exist out there, and we should be addressing those service agreements and prohibiting them. This language is overly broad. It would actually cover a maintenance agreement for rural neighbors who it's mostly sometimes in their deeds that they agree to share costs of maintenance. And it goes from owner to owner. And that's the only one I can think of at this time. So it's overly broad. I hope those issues do not arise, but the amendment certainly does make it better.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other comments on the amendment? Any questions? Okay, do we have a motion on bill? We have a motion. I'll make a motion about to pass.
I'll second the motion.
We have a second, and then we have the amendment. I will make a motion about to pass on the amendment 0426S.
I second that motion.
Okay. All in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, very good. And on the bill itself, 164, any further discussion? All right, seeing none. All in favor of the ought to pass motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes, opposed.
Opposed? We have two opposed, remainder in favor. So that one moves on forward to two. Who would like to take that out?
I will.
Senator Ricciardi. All right, thank you. Next up, Senate Bill 66, third-party veterans claims. Do we have a motion on this one?
I make a motion to re-refer.
Okay,
Second.
we have a second, motion and a second on re-refer. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion of re-refer indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Do we have a motion for consent?
So moved.
I'll second that. All in favor of consent? Aye. Any opposed? All right, so we'll put that on consent.
Mr. Chair, can I thank the volunteers?
You may thank the volunteers.
I just want to thank the volunteers for coming in this morning. Thank you.
All right. Would you like to take this one out, Senator Ricciardi?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, we're good. Senate Bill 79 is kind of an interesting one. We have an amendment on this one, I think, Mr. Jones. And it's in here.
It is
Okay. 0240S. All right, and we are on 79. I think okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
going to head over to introduce that bill.
Yes, okay, thank you. I hope it goes well. All right, let me pull this up. Darn it, too much stuff. Senate Bill 79.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Here we are. Okay. So the amendment is 240S. It is in your packet. Is there any discussion around this bill or amendment? I guess we don't have a motion yet. I'm going to go ahead and move on to pass.
Second.
All right, we have an ought to pass and a second on the original bill, and the amendment, I'm going to also move ought to pass. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
All right, thank you, Senator Murphy. All right, so discussion on this. As I understand it, the amendment just cleans things up a little bit and makes the bill a little bit better. As I recall, that there was general support for this when we heard it. But I'm open to discussion. Any discussion on the amendment or the bill? Okay. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am in favor of the amendment. On the bill itself, I was never satisfied that some employee of the establishment had eyes on a table and that there could in fact be some misuse of the auto pour system
I see.
being delivered to somebody else.
okay. All right, Senator Fenton?
You know, and I would agree with my colleague on that. I think there's just a couple more issues with the bill, and it looks like we already have individuals using safe self-pour in this state.
Yeah.
So I'm curious why the bill is needed, and just that, I think it mandates a lot for businesses in order to even do this in the first place, which I think would hinder business. So I'm yes on the amendment, but no on the bill.
All right, and we have a different fee structure, right? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Senator Murphy.
I have 2 liquor licenses, and I got to tell you, there's zero chance I would ever have any interest in this system myself.
Right.
I think by and large, it's probably a kind of a gimmick, and gimmicks come and go.
Mhm.
But we are legalizing a practice that's already happening across the state. And to answer my colleague's point, as someone who operates these sort of establishments, in busy places, it is already common for people to go up to the bar, get a drink, or a couple of drinks, and take them to a table away from the bar. So that part of it is already happening and is standard practice.
Okay.
What would bother me, frankly, is sort of the inventory system. I think that I wouldn't do this because it would be a headache from an operational standpoint. But if someone else wants to do it, I don't have an
More
objection.
power to them.
So I would support it.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion about to pass on the amendment. Let's take care of that first. All in favor of about to pass on Amendment 240S, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, very good. And then the underlying bill, we have an ought to pass motion on Senate Bill 79. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No,
All right, 3-2 it is. Would anyone like to take this out? Maybe Senator Murphy?
If you would like, Mr. Chairman, I'm at your disposal.
Or I can do it.
No, that's okay.
All right, we'll give that one to you, Senator. All right, thank you. Senate Bill 86 is up next, and there are a couple of amendments on this one, if I'm not mistaken. 86. Do we have a motion on Senate Bill 86? Well, I'll make it then. Yes, sir. Oh, did I miss 80?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I put a check mark by it already. I don't know why. Thank you. I've already had 2 cups of coffee as well, so I don't know.
Need another one.
I must. Thank you, Senator Fenton. All right, Senate Bill 80. The licensing, auditing, and enforcement responsibilities for wholesale and retail e-cigarette sales under the Liquor Commission. And do we have a motion on 80?
On pass?
pass.
All right, we have a motion about the pass from Senator Rishardi, a second from Senator Reardon. And there is an amendment with this one as well. Amendment, if I can find myself. Where are we? 81. These things are in sequential order. Here we are. All right, Senate Bill 80, the amendment is 0229S. And you can find that in your binder. Any discussion on this one? All right, seeing none, we have a motion about to pass on the amendment. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yes.
We had not to pass.
Just in general.
On the bill.
I'll move on,
bill.
I'll move
Oh.
on to pass on vote.
I will second that. Thank you. So let's handle the amendment again. All in favor of the amendment indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right. All in favor of Senate Bill 80 as amended indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I'll move consent.
Second?
All right, all in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Anyone really amped to take this out? Should the need arise?
I'll do it for you.
All right, Senator Rishardi, thank you very much. Now, Senate Bill 86. Yeah, there's some stuff going on with this one. So we have two amendments here. One from Senator Murphy, that is 0681S. And then we have another one from Senators Reardon and Perkins Quokka, 0515S. And Senator Murphy, I'd like to start with you, if you could maybe briefly speak to your amendment.
I'll move on to pass. My amendment is sort of the second half of balancing out the other amendment.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's appropriate to speak to both. But
Entirely up to you.
if it's okay, I'll move the Perkins Quokka Reardon Amendment 0515
As ought to pass.
as ought to pass.
I'll second that.
And this amendment accomplished two things that came up during the initial hearing. The first answered a concern of the Treasury. The second increased the amount of loans guaranteed from 100 million to 300 million at any time. We heard testimony that 100 million really wasn't enough money to move the needle. 300 million was sort of the bare minimum. But it's important to remember that there has never been a default or anything of that nature.
Okay.
The other amendment, to speak on it briefly, is very quick. It's a sunset. If we're going to be adding $300 million of very unlikely yet theoretically possible liability, it's reasonable that we look back at this in a few years and evaluate its effectiveness.
All right.
So,
Thank you for that. Senator Reardon, do you want to add to that? or-
I think Senator Murphy covered it.
Okay.
Both amendments, thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second on everything before us on this one. So we'll start with 515S. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Next, Amendment 681S. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. And then our underlying bill, Senate Bill 86. Yeah.
Second.
You have a second for Senator Reardon. Thank you, Aaron. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll move consent.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Wonderful. You guys are good. All right, next up is,
Like 300 million.
yes. And Senator Reardon, would you like to? All right. Okay, thank you, Aaron. Next up is Senate Bill 88. And this one might be one we want to re-refer.
I would move re-refer on Senate Bill 88.
Okay, do we have a second on that?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion of re-refer, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
Move consent.
I'll second. All in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, anyone want to take this out?
I'll take it out.
Thank you, Senator Fenton. Excellent. 162 will be next. And- Okay. We've got some things on this one. So 162, we have an amendment, 0489S from Senator Birdsell. And as I understand it, this cleans up the language a bit, addresses some of the concerns that the realtors had, and helps to move this thing forward. So do we have a motion on Senate Bill 162? I will make one about to pass.
Second.
Do I have a second from Senator Murphy? And then we have the bill. I will move on to pass, or the amendment. I'll move on to pass on the amendment 489S.
Second.
Second from Senator Rishardi. Discussion. Yes, Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As much as I appreciate the reason for this bill, and agree that we need to do something to know who's buying land around sensitive military operations, this bill, in fact, would cover all of downtown Concord. the 10-mile radius from our installations here cover everything, and I think it's unworkable as written. So I would be inclined to want to re-refer and have some conversations with our chambers of commerce, with potentially the BIA, the realtors, about how we could do some kind of blanket notice or affidavit or education, because right now I think we could pass this and we would just have hundreds of people in default.
Okay, appreciate those comments. Others?
I would agree with my colleague. I think this bill needs to be worked on a little bit. And I understand the intention of the bill because I think we want to protect our military installations. But there are a lot of holes in this bill that kind of blanket too many areas. And, it's just, and, I would hope foreign spies will follow the rule of New Hampshire, but I have a feeling they won't. So I think we could put some more teeth in this and just, make this bill workable. So I'll be a no on this.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Senator Murphy?
This bill was before us last term. It's been around the block a few times, and I heard compelling testimony from various people associated with the military that this is a good bill with a good point and it's needed. So I'll be
Okay.
voting yes.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right, first is the amendment 489S. All in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, and the bill itself, 162. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
All right, that passes 3-2. All right, we'll see. Senator Murphy, would you like to take that out?
I will write that.
All right, thank you very much, sir. All right, Senate Bill 169. I didn't put a note by this one, so I'm going to take a minute and refresh my own brain. That's right, we were. And
It's for March
172.
11th.
Yes, March 11th will do that. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. We've got so much going on without him to take care of me. I really appreciate it, Aaron. Senate Bill 176 is before us, and this is relative to the state minimum hourly wage. Do we have a motion?
I'll do the dirty work.
So we have a motion of ITL from Senator Murphy. I will second that. Is there discussion? Yes, Senator.
I'll just say that I hope that we all trust each other's best intentions on this issue. Wages are prices set by supply and demand like any other good or service. And the system we have in New Hampshire is working quite well. I don't know a single person who makes $7.25 an hour. I have yet to meet that person, and I've asked for it at every hearing I've sat through on this issue. And we as a state have one of the highest median incomes in the country. Unemployment is extremely low here. I don't see the need for this bill. And for that reason, I'm voting for the ITL motion.
All right. Thank you, Senator Murphy. Okay. All right. I do think this bill is well-intentioned, but not necessary. I tend to agree with that sentiment personally. Okay, so we have a motion of inexpedient to legislate on Senate Bill 176. All in favor of said motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we have one opposed. If it's all right, I'll take this one out.
Okay.
All right, 177. This is for the E-Verify system. Do we have a motion? Senator Murphy.
I'll move ITL.
I will second that. Discussion on 177. Is there any? Yes, Senator.
The intention of the bill, I believe, was really good. But after hearing the testimony, just seemed to be too many problems with it. And the best thing to do right now is to inexpedient to legislate.
Yeah, what I heard from a lot of employers was it's a little bit onerous and it's just another activity that doesn't really add value. And I think it was one restaurant owner who said, gave me the characteristics of a particular person, said, I don't need to verify this one, right? So why are you forcing us to it, Senator?
Yeah. I will say that I tried to use this once upon a time and found it to be a big pain. And I think that we as a legislature should be protecting our employers from not forcing them into federal programs.
Okay, thank you. right, so we have a motion of inexpedient to legislate on Senate Bill 177 FN. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so that one sails through. Anyone?
Consent?
We can put this on consent, yeah. All right, we have a motion for consent.
Second.
Do I have a second? All in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are on consent. Who wants to take that out? Senator Shardy. All right, 2 more to go. I think we're gonna make it. All right, next up is 279 FN. And this is a bill from Senator Perkins Coca and housing champions sort of thing. And I will make a motion of ought to pass.
Second.
And we have a second discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Ricciardi.
it's a good bill and I'm going to vote for it, but I do want to say that the fiscal note is
It's,
very, very large and I'm not certain that we can afford it.
yeah,
But I will vote for it.
okay. Yeah, I appreciate that comment. There's a pretty big price tag with it. And of course, this goes to the Finance Committee. And they'll take another look at it more perhaps from the funding perspective, and we'll see what we can do. All right, I think it's the intent of this bill is terrific. And I signed on to it as a co-sponsor, so. We have a motion of ought to pass. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I'll move consent.
Second.
All right, all in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, very good. I'll take this one out since I'm co-sponsor. Lastly, House Bill 399. Oh, we haven't had the hearing. That's a minor detail. I just got rolling. So, the freight train gets moving, it's hard to stop it.
Move, we leave consent.
All
It's
right.
here today.
Yeah, it's today. It's one of the last ones, but we have to hear that one.
Okay.
So, today. All right. Do I have a motion to come out of exec to save me?
So moved.
All right. I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you all very much. Good work. Now, we'll get to what we need to do. I have not seen that.
This is from the county administrators on these, a lot of these bills, just so you know.
Right. So, where is my sheet for today? Where is my sheet for today? There it is. Yes, sir. Yes. All right. Just don't transcribe it. All right, couple more minutes and we'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 90. Thank you, sir. How have you been? Good. Just pretty good. Nice work. You? Yes, you got it. That's what it's for. You ready? We might be a minute early, but I think we're okay. All right. Good morning again. I'd like to open the hearing on Senate Bill 90 and welcome Senator Murphy, who has the bill and an amendment. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Senator Keith Murphy, representing the people of District 16. Picture, please, the historic New England Town Center, parts of New Hampshire that we all love so much. all of those places that you just pictured or just thought about allowed people to work and live close together. And the idea of walking to work or living above your storefront or near your storefront, it's good for everybody. It's healthier. It allows for higher densities. It lowers housing cost, and it's better for the environment. A lot of wins there. But when we entered the period of this country's history and our state's history where we began Euclidean zoning, we went to a strict separation of uses. And that's how you get driving 20 minutes to work down a divided highway with stoplights every 800 feet, right? And those long commutes and that sprawl that happened came because we separated uses. And planners have gradually realized that this was a big mistake. I passed out a publication here from the American Planning Association talking about mixed use. So, I think about things like this when I go to a mall. I don't know if you've been to a mall lately, but most of them aren't doing very well. Amazon and Walmart.com have really put a hurting on malls. So you have a 3-story mall. Why couldn't the top of that mall be used for housing? Why couldn't all those acres of parking around the mall be used for housing? Wouldn't that be terrific? And it would drive customers back to lower stores that remain in the mall. It requires some out-of-the-box thinking, but there's no reason it couldn't be done. And it's recycling that space that's already there. And so this bill is intended to encourage that sort of adaptive reuse. It simply says that where you allow high density residential, or you allow commercially zoned land or mixed-use development, you need to allow residential use. The amendment before you, 0610S, was brought forward at the request of the home builders who were concerned that there might be a builder out there that wants to put a housing development in an industrial zone. And so this language was right from them, which specifies that it's for traditional commercial uses, retail, offices, medical offices, and tech parks, not a factory zone. So it's a bit more limiting. But I hope you look kindly upon the bill. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Senator Murphy? All right, thank you.
I do.
Oh, Senator Ricciardi, please.
Thank you for your testimony. I see the intention of the bill, but I do have to ask you a question because I represent 13 towns, my hometown of Bedford. In 2019, the will of the people, put a warrant article on the ballot. This bill would reverse what the people voted on.
Well, which town was that, ma'am?
Bedford.
Yeah, I have property in Bedford. And my understanding and my reading of that warrant article is that it would not contradict that. The warrant article limited high-density residential to the performance zone along the Route 3 corridor, which is already largely commercial. So if anything, this would, I think, encourage more high-density residential development in that commercial zone. It does not force you to take commercial development in a high-density residential zone. So I think this actually accomplishes what you want, which is to keep higher density residential in commercial areas.
Okay, anything further?
Follow up.
Of course.
So I received this email, we all did, and this was from the Dairy Planning Board. And this is what they had to say. Dairy currently allows up to 40 units per acre on certain lots in our downtown, with the zoning ordinance structured to ensure that local infrastructure can accommodate the increased traffic, waste generation, and overall activity. Also, our land use boards have been very consistent with allowing multi-use development with no residential units on the first floor. Local communities and state cannot inadvertently create a future crisis by replacing all commercially zoned areas with residential units. So I just want to draw that to your attention, the feedback that I'm receiving.
No, I didn't see that email. And if they're already allowing it, I don't see the problem. Right?
It's a
What they've already said is that they already have this, they encourage it. It sounds to me like maybe they make them jump through some hoops to get it done, but they already allow it. we're just saying you should allow what you're already allowing.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
No, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator Murphy.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Matt Mayberry from the Home Builders. You could join us, please.
Here's the amendment. You asked me.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Senators. It's a great day here in New Hampshire. Everyone's back and rested and tan from their respite. I'm Matt Mayberry. I'm the CEO of the New Hampshire Home Builders Association. And I'm here in strong support of Senator Murphy's legislation, SB 90. Senator Murphy's out-of-the-box thinking is exactly what we need right now. We've talked with Senator Murphy, and he was kind and gracious to work with us collaboratively on this amendment to kind of narrow that scope down a little bit. That came from, we didn't want to see a big box distributor next to a 20-unit subdivision next to a truck stop. But we all love Portsmouth. We all love that feel and look. And I think every time we drive by a mall and we see that Sears is left, ooh, some housing could go right there really well. But Senator Murphy is a great partner with the New Hampshire Home Builders Association. We've enjoyed working collaboratively. We really appreciate him reaching out to us saying like, I want to do this. What do you think? We imagine great biotech companies expanding here in New Hampshire where there can be walking and biking trails and sidewalks where employees can walk to work or take a bike home for lunch. We're excited about the concept, and we look forward to continue to working with the Commerce Committee as we solve our housing crisis, because we're going to spend a lot of time together. So,
Probably.
but thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you, Senator.
Any questions for Mr. Mayberry? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate
you.
it. Bertie Deshays from the Municipal.
I bet you a nickel he's going to repeal everything I just said.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Good to hear from Mr. Mayberry this morning. I thank the committee and Mr. Chairman for letting me speak this morning. My name is Bertie Deshays. I represent the Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are opposed to Senate Bill 90 as introduced. We haven't seen the amendment. Noticed many of these amendments have been brought forward, but not always publicly available before the hearing. So we have to comment as to what the underlying bill is before you guys are to, if you are to adopt that amendment. Senate Bill 290 would allow 20 units per acre in areas that permit commercial uses. So this would be 20 units per acre. That's very extremely dense development, especially in zones previously regulated and developed only for commercial use, not residential. Senate Bill 90 will lead to disagreements over definitions because there's kind of lack of clarity throughout the bill. Municipalities have so many different variations on zoning districts that it is almost impossible to make rules at the state level that can fit neatly with local ordinances. Most of them don't simply designate districts as either strictly commercial or strictly residential. They allow certain residential uses in certain districts, but not others, and allow certain commercial uses in certain districts, but not others. The bill tries to accommodate this by defining commercially zoned land, end quote, as, quote, land designated for commercial activities such as retail, office, and service activities, end quote. This still leaves out a lot of room for argument and ambiguity. For example, if a town allows home offices but not standalone offices in a particular district, does that qualify as, quote, commercially zoned land, end quote? If it allows certain, quote, services, end quote, so like a barber shop and beauty salons, but not others, auto repair, pet boarding, is that, quote, commercially zoned, end quote? This is common in agricultural zones where farm stands or similar commercial uses are permitted. So in our reading, Senate Bill 90, as currently drafted and introduced, would mandate 20 units per acre in most agricultural districts throughout New Hampshire. And there could be plenty of disagreement over what constitute as, quote, adequate infrastructure, end quote, as described in the bill. Who is going to decide whether this condition is satisfied? If the municipality has site plan review, presumably it would be considered as part of the planning board's decision, but there are still plenty of towns that don't do site plan review. In those towns, can the builder just decide that there is adequate infrastructure and put up a 20-unit apartment building? This would lead to a lot of confusion and potentially a lot of litigation between towns and developers, which is what we want to avoid. Lines 12 through 14 also appear to create an unfunded mandate for municipalities to provide adequate infrastructure, including roads, water, and sewer systems to support high-density residential developments at 20 units an acre. Further, adequate infrastructure isn't defined anywhere in the bill, so that would create a lot of confusion, need to be litigated in court as what is considered, quote, adequate. Senate Bill 90 defines, quote, high-density residential zone, end quote, but then does not use that term anywhere. Instead, it requires that, quote, high-density residential development, end quote, be permitted. Nothing is stated in the bill about a residential zone, though. It defines, quote, commercially zoned land, end quote, but it doesn't use that term either throughout the bill, instead using, quote, land zoned for commercial use, end quote, which is close but not accurate to how most municipalities do their zoning. Senate Bill 90 also defines, quote, mixed-use development, end quote, but then makes no further reference at all to that term. So it seems as if this definition does not seem entirely relevant to the bill. So for a lot of those technical reasons, and also the fact that in the majority of zoning districts in New Hampshire, it would be mandated that 20 units per acre would be allowed, we're opposed to the bill.
All right, thank you, sir. Questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time this morning. All right, next, Alex Katrubis. You could join us. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Alex Katrubis. I'm representing the Associated General Contractors of New Hampshire. We're the state's leading construction industry organization representing companies in both the highway and building divisions of the industry. We do have some concerns with the bill as introduced, but as I understand it, the amendment solves our concerns from the AGC perspective. And I just want to echo the comments of the Home Builders Association. We really appreciate the prime sponsors' efforts this session around trying to finally do something meaningful and substantive around increasing the housing stock in New Hampshire. When I did show this to my legislative committee and board of directors, we did have some concerns, particularly around allowing heavy use manufacturing or basically the production and the storage of goods. We don't think it makes sense to have that near residential units. It's going to create probably some unintended consequences, and we'll all end up back here trying to fix some of those issues. So I haven't seen, oh, actually, is this the amendment here? I was told of the amendment, so I did check support, and I think this amendment will alleviate our concerns from the commercial contracting perspective. So again, we certainly appreciate and applaud the goals of this bill and all the other bills that the prime sponsors introduced this session. And hopefully this amendment will, again, have some meaningful impact, because it's a problem that I think we all agree needs to be solved. So this is another tool in the toolbox, and appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning.
Well, thank you for coming. Any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Tom DeRosa, you are our last speaker, to the best of my knowledge. Good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good.
Morning, Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Tom DeRosa. I serve as Deputy Director of Housing Action New Hampshire. We are a issue advocacy organization. We advocate for policies to increase access to housing. Our members include housing developers, landlords, property managers, homeless service providers, and many others. We're here today in support of Senate Bill 90. I haven't seen the amendment, though. In speaking briefly with Mr. Mayberry beforehand, I don't see why we would have any issues with it. We believe SB 90 does a number of things that are positive. We build on existing infrastructure, so we're going to allow development of housing where infrastructure already exists. That should bring our costs down for development. As the Prime Sponsor mentioned, we love the idea here of homes near jobs. People can walk to there, they could carpool there. We think that has some environmental benefits as well that we're supportive of. And it expands property rights. It allows you reducing regulations, and we're going to allow the property owner to develop the lot as they see fit. Final note on this is, we're very appreciative of the bill coming forward, and just want to note that it's been done in other states as well. Arizona, Florida, Montana, Hawaii, a number of municipalities around the country have done it. So there's been great success with this. So with this and these reasons, we are in support of SB 90 and hope that you will pass it. I'll say OTPA now, since this amendment is here.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? All right, appreciate your testimony. Paul DeShane from the town of Newington would like to speak as well. Good morning. The button down. There you
gotcha.
go. That's odd. Red means go.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate Committee, to allow me to speak on Senate Bill 90. My name is Paul Shane. I'm a project manager for the town of Newington, and I've been asked by the Board of Selectmen of Newington to speak in opposition to 90 as currently drafted. Basically, to come down to the basic arguments of our opposition is, and probably said before, we see it's an issue of local control. Newington has had a long history of creating their development plan such that everything to the east of the Spalding Turnpike is the business and commercial area, and all the residential uses are on the west side. And that's been very, very successful for us. So this one-size-fit-all type solution, yes, we all admit that there's a housing issue, crisis, as you will, but we just don't feel that in at least Newington's case, this is an appropriate means of addressing that issue. There are many different incompatible uses of having residential uses in a commercial area such as Newington has. You know, maybe if you're talking about a downtown area that historically has had certain mixed use uses, but in Newington's case, you know, the mall, the strips, the commercial industrial, they all generate noise, odors, congestion, lighting that are typically incompatible with residential uses. And that's how our master plan has been developed over the number of years. So as a consequence, it's been successful. Our tax base is, you know, rock solid, as anyone I think would acknowledge, and it would be short-sighted to mix with that. I know House Bill 631 is very similar in nature, and I testified in opposition to that. One of the mitigating factors, though, there is they had a definition of you had to be an urban area. Now, the definition that they used was a little wonky, and yes, they cited the Census Bureau, but without a clear-cut, bright line, like 10,000 people or 5,000 people. Some of that, in which case, Newington wouldn't fall under that category. And I think historically, communities of that size would already have much of the infrastructure and the ability to deal with a mixed-use development that this bill proposes. So for those reasons, and I don't belabor the whole issue, Newington, at least in its circumstances, it would be opposed to the bill as drafted.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your testimony. Senator Murphy.
So Newington has a residential area over here and all the office space and commercial space over here. Is it the policy of Newington that everybody has to drive to go to work or to shop, and no one can walk to those things?
There's infrastructure that you could walk, particularly with the upgrades to the Route 16 Spalding Turnpike area, that there's a lot of traffic control sidewalks accessing that area. No, you don't have, well, we do have a scattering of non-conforming residential uses that are in amongst the commercial uses, so those people can walk. But by and large, you're right. And most of the retail area that's designed for that area is for mall traffic and employee traffic and that sort of thing right off the Spalding. So again, that strategy has worked very, very well for Newington. And we just ask that you recognize that one size does not fit all the problems that we have.
Any other questions? Senator Ricciardi.
Thank you for your testimony. When you say one size doesn't fit all, I understand what you're saying. So would it be fair to say that if your town can't support, you don't have the water infrastructure, but then you have these types of mandates, then is that partially what your concern is? You just can't put everybody in one box. Every situation is different.
To a large degree, we receive our water services from the city of Portsmouth. we do offer the sewer services in town, but that's been structured such that it's supporting that commercial activity. And I'm not sure what capacity it would have to support additional residential uses. Primarily, we're concerned with fire and police and those type of services. We're a small town of 800. It's amazing that we have a full-time police department, a full-time fire department, and other full service or full municipal services for a community our size. But it's out of necessity, and that tax base is driving that. We're unsure with the element of added residential uses in there, what that would do to upset the apple cart, so to speak.
Thank you. Follow up. And you do a master plan,
Oh, yes.
as all the towns do,
Yep.
so they can decide what suits them best, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any further questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 90? Seeing none, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 90, and in a moment or two, we will open Senate Bill 174. Only one person speaking.
Like it
Mhm.
is. No.
They're difficult.
Well,
Look at you two getting coffee brought in. No, I'm kidding. I mean, we already discussed that I need more. Just kidding. Yeah, usually 4 a day.
I can't do that. 2 o'clock.
It's coming, it's coming.
Which they always are.
Are you ready, Mr. Jones? All right, let's open the hearing on Senate Bill 174. I'd like to re-welcome Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Keith Murphy, representing people of District 16. So this bill may be a bit of a reach. I've talked about the tweaks that I'm bringing forward to sort of rein in towns that have begun to abuse the zoning process. This is a good example of it. I'm sure as you drive around through more denser areas of the state, you've probably seen these buildings that look very similar because frankly, the building codes drive them to be very similar. They're 4 or 5 stories tall, they've got stairways at both ends, there's an elevator, they're apartment structures. 3-bedroom and bigger units in those buildings are very, very rare. Manchester just finished a 255-unit building. It has 6 3-bedroom units in it. So why? Why does that happen? Why do these buildings almost always have 1 and 2-bedroom units? And the reason why, if you sit through the planning board meetings where they discuss these buildings and approve them, is that the planning boards make it very clear they do not want 3 and 4 and 5-bedroom units. So they restrain the developers. The developers, obviously, they want to build a building. They tweak the design to fit what the planning board wants. They want 1 and 2-bedroom units. And the fear is we're going to have all these people move in with kids, and they're going to send their kids to our schools, and we're going to need to build new schools, and we're going to hire new teachers, and it's going to be a tax-based nightmare. Well, a couple years ago, 2 years ago, the New Hampshire Housing came out with this really well-done report. Now, I saved a bunch of trees today, and I did not print the full 70-page report. I printed the executive summary. Please read it. But to hit the high points, enrollment, I believe this is in the last 20 years, enrollment is down 15.3% in our schools. Population's up 28.6%, which are largely in migrations from other states. The ratio of public school students per housing unit since 1990 has decreased from 0.39 to 0.29 students per unit. Housing built from 2014 to 2023 generated net fiscal benefits to local school districts at an average of $1,711 per unit. Older units built before 2013 yielded a VAT value of $190 per unit. All housing types generated positive net value. So there is very little correlation between the number of units built and added, and the impact on schools. And so what this bill tries to do is basically say, planning boards do not consider, you should not be considering the number of bedrooms in a given development when you're deciding whether or not to approve development. It's to allow the developers, the builders, to meet the market demand without being pushed one way or the other.
Okay.
Because I will tell you, in all honesty, I have 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. And when 6 years ago, when I found myself single and divorced, and I went scrambling for rentals, it was very hard to find a unit big enough to support my family. And people like me, we need houses too. And I'm not alone. People out there need 3 and 4 bedroom units. But unfortunately, planning boards don't like to see those. And with that, I'll take any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, seeing none, appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Brody Shea.
Thank you, Mr.
Morning,
Chairman,
yeah.
and thank you to the committee for letting me speak again today. My name is Brody DeShays. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are opposed to Senate Bill 174 as currently drafted. The intent of Senate Bill 174 seems to be to prevent municipalities from zoning out families by limiting dwelling units to 1 or 2 bedrooms. However, there are good reasons to limit the number of bedrooms per dwelling unit, primarily having to do with septic capacity. Municipalities must be able to limit the size of septic systems to promote health, safety, and general welfare, such as protecting residents' groundwater and limiting the chances of septic system failures and the contamination from that to others' properties. The total number of bedrooms must be subject to limitation to avoid overburdening the septic systems that might exist or that are going to be built, especially in denser zone districts. Additionally, there are several technical issues that I'm going to go into with this bill. Adding a second definition of, quote, planning board, end quote, is confusing, especially when RSA 673:2 already exists. Specifically, Senate Bill 174's definition on lines 5 and 6, quote, a body responsible for reviewing and approving site plans and building permits for residential developments, end quote. First, planning board's duties are already defined in RSA 674:1. Second, planning boards do not review or approve building permits ever. That is a building inspector's job. We would reasonably conclude that there is no such thing as a, quote, planning board, end quote, under this bill's definition because there is no municipal body that is responsible for approving site plans and building permits. I would also guess the committee and the sponsor does not want planning boards to have the approval, the final approval over building permits. Additionally, issuance of building permits is contingent in part on an applicant being able to demonstrate adequate provisions of water supply and sewage disposal under RSA 45-A:38 DS. This is the Department of Environmental Services septic system load requirements. Sizing of septic systems, gallons of water being used per DES rules is in part contingent on the number of bedrooms being served. For example, a 3-bedroom septic is not the same as a 7-bedroom septic system. Not being able to consider the number of bedrooms in the sizing of septic systems could upend the current system and rules for determining necessary size of sewage disposal systems. Many planning boards also do not review site plans either because not every municipality with a planning board has given the planning board site plan review authority. Most planning board review of residential development occurs not in site plan review, but in subdivision review, which the bill doesn't even mention. Site plan review is only for non-residential uses and multifamily dwelling units under RSA 674:43. We are concerned that this bill intends to exempt subdivision reviews, which would be a major limitation on reasonable and responsible local development. Also, a quote planning board shall treat all residential, let me restate this. Also, a quote planning board shall treat all residential developments uniformly, end quote, could be construed in several ways that creates ambiguity. Does this mean, for example, a mobile home park must be treated the same as a 5-lot subdivision of single-family homes or the same as a 12-unit apartment building? Senate Bill 174 creates potential conflict with definitions of workforce housing in RSA 674:58, Roman 4, which states that, quote, housing developments in which more than 50% of the dwelling units have fewer than 2 bedrooms shall not constitute workforce housing for the purposes of the subdivision, end quote. The bill also creates a potential conflict with minimum parking requirements in RSA 674:16, Roman 7, which states quote, "In its exercise of the powers granted under the subdivision, the local legislative body of a city, town, or county in which there are located unincorporated towns or unorganized places may regulate accessory parking for vehicles, but shall not require more than 1.5 residential parking spaces per unit for studio and one-bedroom units under 1,000 square feet that meet the requirements for workforce housing under RSA 674:58 Roman 4. So this bill will likely most impact municipalities who have minimum parking requirements tied to the number of bedrooms in their site plan regulations. It is also unclear if it would affect parking requirements tied to the number of bedrooms if located in the zoning ordinance. So for these reasons of the massive increase in the massive limitations on parking requirements and the several ambiguities and the unclarity of planning boards, how they're defined and what their jobs and roles would be in municipalities. And because this would create a lot of confusion for municipalities, we are opposed to Senate Bill 174, and I'll answer any questions.
Okay. Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brody, could we get a printed copy of your testimony so we can go through those sites?
That would be.
Yeah, it's mostly just bullet points for, I just
That's fine.
scratched down my notes, but yeah, I can send that over.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Appreciate
you.
it. Chris Norwood, from the Realtors. Morning.
Good morning. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Chris Norwood, and I am the 2025 Vice Chair of the New Hampshire Association of Realtors Public Policy Committee, representing our some 7,000 members, and we are supporting SB 174. So to repeat a little bit of what the senator said in his introductory remarks, there's this fallacy argument that we feel number of bedrooms equals number of kids equals school budget increase equals more taxes. And I've seen this play out in testimony in front of planning and zoning boards, and it's unfair. The Realtors a couple years ago did commission a study by Professor England of UNH discrediting this theory, mostly in regards to the fact that there's excess capacity in New Hampshire schools, because since I was a kid, we've been having a declining birth rate in this state. So there's excess capacity in most New Hampshire schools. But even without this fallacy, why is it the planning board's jurisdiction to govern the number of bedrooms? We don't ask the planning board to govern whether there's a washer and dryer or the number of bathrooms. Bedrooms seems to be a market condition based upon what a developer, the private property owner, and the tenants, the market demands, and I think that's where it should be. Relative to the septic issue, that is between the developer or the property owner and the DES to ensure that there are needs met for the proper septic capacity. I'll say as a sidebar, number of bedrooms to septic capacity in itself is an arbitrary. Having been to a number of multifamily developments in my career, performing valuations for banks, I can tell you the number of bedrooms does not always equal the number of occupants in a premise. But it is what it is. It's the best tool we have to determine septic capacity, but it should rest between the DES and the developer, not within the planning board. So again, New Hampshire Association of Realtors supports this bill. We hope that you will do so as well, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Are there any questions? Senator Fenton.
Thank you for taking my question. Instead of a blanket kind of prohibition, couldn't we just limit arbitrary rejections based solely on bedrooms? While still taking into account, infrastructure and services.
Thank you for the question. If I understand correctly, you're saying the bill would change from the text as written to say the planning board shall not mandate the number of bedrooms 1, 2, or 3. Is that what you're trying to drive at?
Yeah, what I'm looking at here is kind of a blanket prohibition on this, and I think hearing other testimony and whatnot, more guidance on fair housing practices, without essentially overriding local control, but limiting these arbitrary rejections based solely on bedroom counts, but also still taking into account parking, infrastructure, water and sewer, because I think it's dangerous just to say, we're rejected, we're going to do this. It's got 7 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. Let's go forward with it. I think we could dial this back a little more so it's more palatable for everyone.
So I think Senator, and I'm just rereading some of the text of the bill, there are still parking regulations. I think there was a bill last year that limited it to 1.5 spaces above 10 units. Obviously septic capacity, water capacity, that also goes into life safety, fire suppression over a certain number of units. So I don't think anything in this bill stops the discussion of those other life safety issues. This bill simply, in my view, prohibits the town from asking questions that lead down the path of, we don't want kids in our community. And that's where I see this bill, because again, number of bedrooms is a placeholder for the number of children. And as a complete sidebar, we do need more 2-3 bedroom units, and it's not for families. It's for the first place I had out of college was a 3-bedroom unit renting with a couple buddies, because that's the only thing we could afford. We're building too many 1 units, and those are really expensive for young professionals.
Just to follow up and clarify.
Please, yeah.
I don't think towns are saying, we don't want children in our towns or our cities.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I live in a different town then. But the fear of this is just, that, in my opinion, I'm reading it, and we've heard testimony that contradicts kind of what you're saying as well. I think we have a housing issue. I think we need more 2 and 3 bedrooms. I think we need more 5 bedrooms. I think we need a ton more bedrooms. My fear is just that, I think there's a way to limit some of these rejections based on bedrooms, but not going so drastic as this bill per se with local control.
Thank you for the question. I view the number of bedrooms almost like a plate. I'll put it in this context. When I interview someone to join my firm, I am not allowed to ask for their age. But there are questions that employers can ask that are placeholders for age. When did you graduate? What Saturday morning cartoons did you watch, right? What video game system did you grow up with? These are questions that are placeholders for age. And I think the number of bedrooms is a placeholder for, are you bringing kids into our community? And I would respectfully disagree that I do think that there are some municipalities that are opposed to more children in their community because they have concerns about their tax rate. And I would personally believe that that is unfounded fear.
Now I got to follow up again.
All right,
We're
please.
We're peeling back layers of an onion here. I apologize. Is it the community saying they don't want children, or is it a landlord that is having an applicant talking about if you have children or not? Because I also own a business. I know what questions you can and cannot ask a potential employee, and there are ways to have those discussions. But I'm nervous about saying that these communities are denying children living there.
So thank you, Senator, for the question. I do think, again, first person, I heard it with my own ears in a municipality when there was 1 bedroom and a woman stood up and said, you can't tell me that they're not going to put 2 or 3 children in that 1 bedroom unit. And I'm like, well, no, that's not the case. But it was a clear verbatim of the fear being articulated. But also you can look to the court system, the community of Brookline. I don't have the details on the court case, but they were recently sued in federal court for discrimination because if you looked at my understanding of the fact pattern of the case, there was discussion in the Facebook, in the planning board posts about, well, we don't want more children in our community because there was a large project coming in. And the developer sued them in federal court because they were against the fair housing. I'm trying to think of all the protected classes. What's that called? Consumer protection. And they were sued in federal court as a result of that. So I do think that, again, first person example, there are some communities that are that talk about it, and at least one community that was challenged in court as a result of it.
I'm all done. All right.
All good. Let's go. More onion.
Anything further? All right, thank you. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 174? Please come forward, Mr. Mayberry.
Good morning once again. Matt Mayberry, CEO of the New Hampshire Home Builders Association. And my overindulgence in caffeine couldn't let me sit back there. We're in strong support of 174 because to address one of the committee members' concerns, we as builders hear all the time, we don't want kids in our schools, we don't want to build schools. And planning boards and zoning boards will do clever things, such as saying it can be 2 bedrooms, but they can't be on the same floor. It's a very clever way of saying around. Well, we're equally clever, and sometimes we'll build 2 bedrooms and an office. Oopsie, they forgot to cover that part. We know how to work around this. What this does is it pulls back the curtains and has an open and honest conversation about how we treat children and families, our workforce in this state. You're going to hear me really get into this on 163 later on. I've heard this. Please don't do this. What some towns will do, especially in Durham, I live in Rochester, but they'll say no more than 3 unrelated people can live in the same home. That's how they're trying to manage these things, but please, seen it, lived it, I could have a trail of builders out the door saying this happens to every single one of them in planning boards. They don't want children in their schools, and they're just blatant about it. They don't even hide it. I will stop speaking now.
All right.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Mayberry? All right, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. All right. Anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 174? All right, with that, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 174. We will start 175 in just a moment. We are running a little bit behind time, so, but we might pick some up here. so I'll keep quiet. All right, are you ready, Mr. Jones? All right. It is the Senator Murphy show today, so I will open the hearing on Senate Bill 175 and re-welcome the good senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Keith Murphy, and people of District 16. I have to say I've got more bills today than I do in most years. All right. So a lot of the bills that you've seen me come forward, it's me versus the Municipal Association. If you haven't seen the trend, I'm sure I'm not on Mr. Deshaies' Christmas card list. This is me attempting to empower a municipality. I'll talk about covenants for a second. Covenants are what we used before we had zoning. A lot of the things we use zoning for now were done with covenants, which are basically legal agreements that are written into the deed. They're recorded with the deed as they become part of the deed. They can pass on, unless there's an expiration date, it can be perpetual. And there are still to this day communities throughout the country that rely on covenants. Famously, Houston, Texas. It's a city of almost 3 million people. No zoning. They just use covenants. So what this bill does is it actually would grant municipalities the ability to enforce covenants, to look at the deed and say, we're gonna hold you to this. I used to have a house in a community where we were told in the covenants that we couldn't have chickens, that we couldn't wash our cars on the street, that if we replaced the roofing color or the paint color, it had to be in line with the houses around us. Communities and developers use them to maintain some semblance of aesthetic compatibility, usually, and quality of life. You can't put your trash out before this time, and the trash can must be put back by that time. That's what they're typically used for these days, but they're still very common. We talked about a lot size bill a few weeks ago. That sort of requirement, that prohibition against subdivision below a certain size, that can be part of a covenant. So it's not that I'm against all restrictions. I'm simply against zoning and the way we do it today. So this would encourage a little bit more covenants and allow communities to enforce the covenants. The flip side to that, Part 2 of the bill says municipalities can't require the covenants. It needs to come from the builders and the buyers. That way, they're contracts that are voluntarily entered into as opposed to things that are tacked on to buyers against their will. And I would say, I hope Mr. Shea sees this as an olive branch. I'm trying to empower municipalities with this. This would actually be, I think, a good thing for his clients. And I look forward to his suggestions on how we can better improve our housing crisis in the state. Thank you.
Any questions for Senator Murphy?
Not a question, but may I
You may,
make some comments, Mr. Chair?
briefly, if you
Okay.
could. We can
Well-
always do these in executive session later too, if they're extensive, but feel free.
I'll just be brief and I'll be more elaborate in executive session. But,
Okay.
you know, while I support the vast majority of the housing bills, we're not looking at any unintended consequences here. When you can't look at the housing crisis or any one bill as a standalone bill, you know, and I think that's the problem here. The lack of attention to details on these mandates in most of these bills will lead to towns having different rules and costly lawsuits. You just can't get rid of local control without putting the burden on taxpayers. There seems to be a lack of balance in the vast majority of these bills. And I'll leave it at that and wait for executive session.
All right,
Well,
thank you.
I would appreciate questions instead of comments. I don't think what you just said at all applies to the bill before us. If anything, again, I'm empowering local control with this bill. We'll save the argument for an actual exec session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murphy. Anything further? All right, very good. All right, so Brody Shays signed up to speak. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee for letting me speak today. My name is Bertie DeShays. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are opposed to Senate Bill 175 as currently drafted. I know. I do want to say, you know, we're not opposed to Senator Murphy at all. He's a very pleasurable person. It's just many of his bills go against our legislative policies, and I have some copies of that. So maybe I'll share that with the committee before the lunch break so you guys can read what guides our advocacy and how we're a member-run organization. So I'm told by our board and our members what their priorities are of municipalities. So first, the term, quote, covenants, end quote, is often used in planning and zoning, but it has no specific legal definition. So it can mean a lot of things in a lot of circumstances and in a lot of contexts. So we would interpret it as a promise, and this is a very broad interpretation because how it's utilized in the planning and zoning process, as a promise by an applicant to do or not do a certain thing with respect to the use of land approved by a local board. It could mean an agreement as part of granting of a variance or special exception that a business will operate only during certain hours, or will not serve alcohol, or will keep noise below a certain decibel level, or almost any other condition of approval. A development restriction in accordance with RSA 674:21-A as part of a site plan or subdivision approval. An agreement as part of a subdivision approval that the streets in the subdivision will subsequently be dedicated to public use, subject to acceptance by the town. An agreement to dedicate part of the land in a subdivision to public use as a park, playground, etc., so green space, and several other things as part of the planning and development process. Senate Bill 175 would also prohibit a municipality from requiring or encouraging any affordability restrictions covenants not tied to the workforce housing statute, RSA 674:58 through 61. This could inhibit communities from adopting innovative solutions with affordability thresholds that don't match the workforce housing statute. An example of this might be Dover's fair market rents, FMRs, or higher income/rent limits above workforce housing limits, which might make sense in a particular market. It would actually help developers. It also could have implications for a municipality that is requiring other types of covenants/deed restrictions, including conversion easements, utility easements, drainage easements, and other easements of that nature. Could also affect state agencies such as the New Hampshire Business and Economic Affairs Program requirements for the Invest New Hampshire program, which are tied to 80% of area median income, AMI, not the workforce housing statute income limits. Under this bill, all those things I previously listed could be invalid. However, it's impossible to know exactly which would be invalid because there is no definition of, quote, covenant, end quote, which would lead to hopeless confusion and endless litigation over what are covenants that can be required, what aren't, what would be covered under this, if this were to become law, what wouldn't be. The other parts of the bill we have concerns with is the section allowing municipalities to enforce, quote, private covenants, end quote. By, quote, private covenant, end quote, we assume it means covenants between landowners dealing with issues such as maintaining private roads or driveways, or condominium homeowners association covenants about what colors the houses can be painted, or whether they can hang laundry or clotheslines or other things of that nature. Basically, how people behave and how their dwellings look in private associations. Those are never enforceable by a municipality, and that's why they're called private covenants. They're a private agreement for those who enter. When they purchase that home, they understand that there's covenants and, there's deed restrictions, and they have to abide by that. That's, part of the process when they do like a title search. We are a bit confused as to what the compelling interest for a municipality to enforce a private I think in my parents' private neighborhood, what's the compelling interest for my taxpayer dollars to be enforcing the covenants in, the 500 Forest Road Association? That to me gets a little bit confusing as to why the government should be helping fund that private association's job to enforce its own covenants. Additionally, to remove the municipality's ability to require certain covenants during the planning and zoning process, but then make them responsible to enforce private agreements, to us seems to kind of conflict with what has been historically done in New Hampshire. In giving power to municipalities to enforce private covenants would likely strain existing municipal resources and could result in municipality enforcing a private covenant of an HOA, so a homeowners association, that is discriminatory in nature against certain persons. That happens from time to time where HOAs have a discriminatory covenant. That would probably lead to lawsuits that property taxpayers would have to fund. That would be very costly. And municipalities would be enforcing a private covenant when, in our opinion, they have no obligation to do that. With that, I appreciate you guys taking my testimony, and I'll take any questions.
Senator Murphy.
Mr. Deshay, I'm very sorry that my olive branch has not been well received. I just want to say I'm not married to the text in this bill. And I feel as if I brought forward roughly a dozen housing bills trying to address a housing crisis I think we all acknowledge is real.
Mhm.
And your organization is opposed to all of them, and I'm sure they will continue to oppose all of them. If you have any ideas, or your organization does, that would make things better and would encourage more building, please bring them to me or to the committee, and I would be perfectly happy to change this bill or try to convince my fellow committee members to change the bill. I would love to hear any ideas that are constructive to address the problem. And that's an invitation from me to you to work together to make the things better. Thank you.
Senator Murphy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comment. And we did send some testimony to the entire Senate on Senate Bill 115 and Senate Bill 279, which we believe are ways to work collaboratively with municipalities to increase investment, to build the infrastructure out, to have reasonable and responsible development, and to create the environment that's required, that's necessary for higher density development, for more affordable housing. We're more than happy to work with any of the senators, any legislator, and especially in advance to the legislative sessions. I mean, many of these bills, we were never asked for feedback originally. We have to review these and see, are they workable for municipalities? And many of them, after reading them, having legal counsel review them, have several problems, and not just conflict with existing law and historical precedents, but that would make them essentially unworkable in municipalities and even conflict with existing workforce housing statutes. So we appreciate the effort of legislators to try to be creative, but at the same exact time, we'd appreciate being a partner at the table and not entirely closed out of the process. And we could have maybe addressed many of these issues months ago before the bills were introduced. So.
Okay. All right. Anything further on Senate Bill 175 as opposed to other bills? Okay.
Nope.
Thank you, Mr. Deshay. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 175? All right. Seeing none, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 175. We'll open 281 in just a moment. Take a trade. Oh, this one should fly. Where's the senator? Oh, there he is. All right, I'm going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 281. I'll preface welcoming the senator by saying that a Class 5 road cuts right through my farm. House on one side, barn on the other. And in the wintertime, because it's partly our driveway, I'm responsible for the maintenance of that Class 5 if we want to use it. The town walks away from December 10th to April 10th. So, and it's nice. We have a quiet road. So Senator Murphy, I welcome you to introduce Senate Bill 281.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Keith Murphy, people of District 16. I will tell you my own little anecdote about Class 6 roads. When I was a town planner in northern New Hampshire, I once had a call from a lady, and she said, I and my husband bought land in New Hampshire 20 years ago. We've been saving money for retirement, and we wish to build, and we want to file for building permits. How do we go about it? And I'm in the restaurant business these days because it's nice to tell people, yes. Can I have a steak? Yes. Can I have a beer? Yes. In this case, I said, let me get back to you on that. It's a Class 6 road, not maintained. We passed around a little fact sheet on Class 6 roads here if you don't know what they are. And this town that I was working for, just as a matter of policy, would never approve a building permit on a Class 6 road. Just wouldn't do it flat out. What if there was a fire? What if someone had a heart attack? What if they needed us and we couldn't get there? How will they get their trash out? I mean, it was things like that. Some communities will let people build on Class 6 roads if they sign a waiver of liability, which is then properly recorded as on a deed, what I just talked about. Basically saying that we accept that our constituents are adults and they are free to make their own decisions, and we can hold them to that. Some communities do it, some communities do not. And so what this bill does, it says, if you own the property and you're willing to make that acknowledgement, you can build. And this would open up a lot of land for housing and for building in our state. I will tell you that I found it very upsetting to have to tell that woman that her 25-year dream was never to be realized and she could never live on this land that she had purchased years ago. And I hope that we don't do that to too many more people. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Senator Murphy? All right, seeing none, thank you. Appreciate it. Brody DeShays would like to speak on Senate Bill 281. Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm going through the ringer today.
You're earning your money today.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for taking my testimony. Again, Brody, for the record, Brody DeShays. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are opposed to Senate Bill 281 as currently written. Senate Bill 281 is a significant change in law, and it would be important that municipalities know about and have the opportunity to amend their zoning ordinances before it were to go into effect. So we kindly request at a bare minimum that, you know, if the committee were to move forward with this bill, that they make it so it goes into effect probably like July 1 of 2026. That'd be much more workable for municipalities. That aside, current state law, RSA 674:41, says a structure can be built on a lot where the only access is via a Class 6 road only if the governing body has approved the construction after comment by the planning board, the municipality doesn't assume responsibility for the maintenance or liability for damages, and the property owner demonstrates that notice of the limits of municipal liability have been recorded at the registry of deeds. The existing law overrides local zoning authority. It prohibits a municipality from allowing building on Class 6 road except as provided in the statute. It was created to prevent scattered and premature development. So places where the municipality hasn't built out infrastructure, hasn't built out roads that it upkeeps, hasn't raised the funds from taxpayers to do those things, and to prevent people from living in very remote areas that could pose risk to not just, you know, mostly it's emergency services. So whether or not a police vehicle, an ambulance, or a fire truck can even get out to their dwelling, hence why many municipalities require the waiver of liability. Senate Bill 281 would eliminate the first requirement that I previously listed, so those, you know, under 674:41, but leave the others intact with slightly different language. In a sense, the bill expands local control by eliminating one of the requirements for a municipality to allow construction. A town could, under Senate Bill 281, if it chooses, allow construction on a Class 6 road without making the owner go through the process of planning board review and governing body approval. Restricting construction on Class 6 roads is important because although the original builder of a house obviously will be aware that the town does not maintain the road, subsequent purchasers may not be. Although the purchaser should know if they do a title search and the notice has been properly recorded, renters are often never aware because they don't have to go through a title search. When someone moves into a house on a Class 6 road, again, the lack of municipal maintenance can come as a big surprise during the first big snowfall, or when the first tree falls across the road and they lack, maybe if they're from, Boston or New York City, they might not have thought about buying a chainsaw with a large enough bar to deal with the removal of the timber. When someone moves into a house, requiring the builder to get the governing body approval before construction at least provides some oversight by the town so that houses are not being built in places that are entirely unsuitable and then sold or rented to unsuspecting buyers and renters. So in many ways, it protects the consumers. The bill does eliminate the oversight from the town. However, under the current situation is that many towns, they don't have any of these requirements in their zoning ordinances because they don't need to. The requirements exist in state law, and the town simply relies on the state law. If Senate Bill 281 were to be enacted, many municipalities would probably update their zoning ordinances and limit the amount of whether or not residential units or any types of units were permitted in specific zoning districts. That would create probably an issue for development. Right now, with the oversight, you can balance the need for development and preventing it from being scattered and kind of random with the property owner's maybe desire and ability to prove that, no, this isn't random, this actually makes sense, and I can do the upkeep of this road. Again, if this bill were to become law, it is essential, even more than many of the other bills that we've been discussing today, that the effective date be moved to mid-2026 so that towns have an opportunity to amend their zoning ordinances to deal with some of this scattered development, should it be necessary to protect the interest of the rest of those who are living in the municipality and the costs that could be associated with the increased development. I'll also note that while we assume it is intended to encourage more housing, RSA 674:41 doesn't apply only to housing. It applies to all structures. So that means commercial or industrial. So that means theoretically someone could put a strip mall in on a Class 6 road. Not that they would, but there are times where in specific areas they could put in like an electrical generator. So, all of a sudden you're going to have very large industrial parks possibly going in on Class 6 roads, which would be a concern to many municipalities. And again, towns can deal with that in their ordinances, but many don't because of this state statute. They just let it come as a case-by-case, issue. And typically when it's someone with a dwelling unit, most select boards are very reasonable and say, well, as long as you, promise to upgrade the roads in a few places so that our ambulance can get through, it's fine. I mean, I can speak to my municipality. In probably the last 3 years, I think all 5 have been approved when people have tried to build or improve upon existing structures on their Class 6 roads. And at least with one of them, some of the property owners agreed that they would update a bridge so then the ambulance could make it out to them in the fire truck should there be some kind of need to call those emergency services. So for those reasons, we think the existing statute actually does a pretty good job, better than what others might give it credit for, and we'd ask the committee to vote ITL on this bill.
Are there any questions? As a marketing professor, I'm pretty sure no one's putting a strip mall in a Class 6.
But they could. By right, they could.
Theoretically, they could. All right, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 281? All right, seeing none. Oh, yes, all right, please.
My name is Paul Alfano. I did sign the.
You did, but you didn't indicate you were speaking. But you're welcome to speak.
I apologize.
No, come on, please. That's why we ask.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
My name is Paul Alfano. I'm a lawyer here in Concord. Our main office is here in Concord. And in fact, I used to be Senate legal counsel in a prior life. I'm here on my own behalf because my office, we deal primarily with roads. It's a quirky niche that we have: roads, private roads, Class 6 roads, road maintenance agreements, and easements. And by the way, Mr. Chairman, I did want to say I'm planning on submitting something, a written statement, but I'll just give you the highlights here.
Great.
But anyway, that's what our practice is. And this bill caught my attention because it addresses a problem I've seen over and over again through the years. It's kept us very busy. But in order to get a building permit, you've got to comply. Someone has to, on a Class 6 road, if they're on a Class 6 road or a private road, you have to comply with this RSA 674-41, which itself is a tough read. But what it comes down to, I think it was fairly described earlier, that if you can't get a building permit unless you're on a Class 5 road, or the road is shown on a plan that's been approved by the planning board. There's a couple other exceptions, but they don't apply. I won't get into those other exceptions. They're extremely rare. So first of all, this doesn't apply to new developments. New developments, you're going to have a plan approved by the planning board. So that goes off to the side. What it applies to is what kind of situation that Senator Murphy mentioned, which I call the one-offs. Exactly what you said is what I see all the time. Somebody owns 40 acres or whatever it is, and they want to get a building permit. And they're on a Class 6 road and they want to get a building permit. So the way the statute reads is, if you're on a Class 6 road or a private road, you can get a building permit, but you need the approval of the Board of Selectmen with input from the planning board. The problem is, there's no criteria for the selectmen to apply. So it's the total Wild West out there. There are some towns, and I've also encountered a town that proudly announced that they never give building permits on Class 6 roads. But I've seen, I just want to tell you, some other, because it's the Wild West, some of the situations I've encountered, these are your constituents. Commonly, we'll see something like, the road can't be more than 300 feet, or it can't be more than 600 feet. So it's all different from town to town. Well, you could have a 750-foot road that's in better condition than the 300-foot road. It's just totally arbitrary. But the really bad situations I see is so what happens, it's like classic zoning, is that the board may say, tell you what, we'll give you your building permit, but you've got to record this statement that's required by the statute. There's two things. You have to acknowledge that the town is not obligated to maintain the road, and the town is not liable for damages. All my clients are always fine with that. They have no problem signing that waiver and recording it. They get it, that that's part of the deal. It's not a town-maintained road. But then towns will say, tell you what, we want you to maintain the road. And then it's either the person says, well, no, and then they're out, they don't have their building permit, or they say yes. And now they've signed something that's recorded that obligates them to maintain the road, which it's a whole basket of problems I won't get into with that. Another thing, the most egregious thing I saw was one town required someone to agree to contribute toward improvements to the road. And then the town gave a building permit to someone further down the road and required that person to make all kinds of improvements, almost to Class 5 specifications. And then they came to my client to say, well, you signed this saying that you were going to contribute toward the improvements to the road, pony up. But we're talking like major improvements. It was very expensive. So those sorts of things, those are just examples I want to tell you of what we see when the select board are totally on their own to come up with whatever they want. So I see it, there are two ways you could address that. One is the legislature could set forth what criteria the select board have to apply, or you could pass a law that requires the select board to adopt policies. And there's a bill in the House, House Bill 296, that's similar, kind of says that, but I think it's going to be amended. The other approach you could take is the one that you've got here, which is just to strip out the Board of Selectmen involvement at all and beef up, which looks like what the bill does, just beefs up the acknowledgements that the property owner makes that they understand it's not going to be, the town's not maintaining it, they're not going to hold the town liable. So that's why I support the bill. But I did want to mention one other thing that you may want to consider, because there is another possibility you could go if you were inclined. So the House Bill 296, when clients come to me, the And when we deal with municipalities, I have noticed that there is one common theme that that's underlying a lot of the board's decisions, and that is whether an emergency vehicle can get to the house. Understanding that it's not obligated to go to the house, but whether emergency vehicle can get to the house. Maybe that would address the municipal association's concerns. I don't know, but that is another possibility. It would still involve the select board though, because someone has to make the determination whether an emergency vehicle can get to the house. But that's all. I just throw that out. It's really kind of a policy consideration. But otherwise, I would approve. I would support the bill as written. I know a lot of my clients would be. Which definitely addresses a need I've seen over the years.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. I have a note that Senator McConkey would like to speak, but I don't see him here. So in his absence, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 281. And we will open 283 in just a moment. Yeah. It is. We did that. Yeah. I've heard a lot of this, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Again, he's coming up after me. All right. I'm going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 283 and re-welcome Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Murphy from District 16. I've spent so much time on this couch today that if anybody finds any change, it's probably mine. This is such a minor tweak. You know, I've had a lot of tweak bills. This bill does very little, but it's still worth doing. Florida area ratio. There's a flyer here on how to calculate a Florida area ratio. It's really only an ordinance that pops up in communities that have very dense areas. So Manchester, Nashua, Portsmouth. I would be very surprised if anybody outside of those might have an FAR requirement in the ordinance. Basically, it's a way to sort of make sure that the height is proportional to the width and depth and dimensions of a given lot. The issue is that there's sometimes some inconsistencies in how communities calculate the Florida area ratio. And what this bill does, it simply says that it's going to be calculated as area above grade. So if your building is built and there's parking below, the parking would not be counted as part of the floor area ratio. Gotcha. If there's storage space below, that wouldn't be counted as part of the floor area ratio. Other than that, it still lets communities adopt those ratios and enforce those ratios. It just says they'll be consistent throughout the state.
Okay. Any questions for the senator? All right, so basically we're talking about essentially basement space, not counting toward the overall height.
That's correct, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
All right, thank you.
This concludes all of my bills for the day.
All right. We're glad we could get them all done in one day. Brody Deshays, please. This is like,
I know, not our intent, but no, it's got to do justice by our membership.
Well,
Thank you,
welcome
Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for hearing my testimony again. This will be the second to last
Okay.
time you'll hear from me today, so there'll be one more bill.
163, I'm guessing.
Yes, it is 163. I'll
All
be
right.
very brief on that
Let's
one, though. Yes, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Brody Deshays, New Hampshire Municipal Association, were opposed to Senate Bill 283. The proposed new language for RSA 674:78, Roman 2, so lines 15 through 17, we kind of view those as unnecessary. The below grade area either is or is not excluded oftentimes in the zoning ordinances. Often, if the below grade is unfinished, is finished or livable space, it is included in the floor area ratio. Also, in paragraph 3 of the bill, lines 18 through 20, it's not necessary, and if the bill moves forward, should be deleted. All it is saying is that the planning and zoning boards may continue to do their jobs, which is already described in RSA 673:3. This language also seems to be giving zoning boards more authority. They do not, in the ordinary course, quote, review and approve new construction projects, end quote. Zoning boards grant variances or special exceptions for proposed use, and the planning board typically approves the construction details. The proposed new RSA 674:79, lines 21 through 22 are also a little bit confusing. They're pretty vague, and we would consider them pretty unenforceable. Like who is gonna, who will enforce and how will they, the requirement to review height limitations? What standard will be used to decide whether revision of height limitations is necessary? And what does quote align with the goals of this subdivision, end quote, mean? Those things are very open-ended. They could be interpreted a myriad of ways by various different groups and people. The language in lines 21 through 22 instructing municipalities, quote, to review and revise height limitations to align with the goals of the subdivision. Again, broad, lacks clarity, and we believe that the intent may be for municipalities with floor area ratios to review and revise their height limitations to allow taller buildings. However, typically height limitations are set independently of these floor area ratios, work to cross, so it's not clear how changing, often called FARs, to exclude below grade areas would have a direct impact on the municipality's height limitations. We would suggest striking lines 21 through 22 absent of clarity on the intent of this sentence.
All right. Good.
Thank you.
All right, any questions? Seeing none, appreciate your testimony. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on Senate Bill 283? All right, seeing none, I will close that hearing. Next up will be Senate Bill 85 in just a moment. Yeah, we're doing okay. We might make it. You guys help. Okay.
Takes the person that's leading.
All right, I'm going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 85, and I see no senator, so. We are looking for Senator Pearl. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have opened it so quickly. We're going to take a 2-minute recess. And we see if we can locate the senator. If we can't, I'll do the intro. I can do this. All right, we're going to wait one more minute. Yeah, I'm happy to do this one. Reopen the hearing on Senate Bill 85. Senator Sherman, you take over. While I go fix this. All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Senator Dan Innes, representing District 7 from Bradford, New Hampshire. And I'm here on behalf of Senator Pearl to introduce Senate Bill 85. And I'll be very brief because I know the Bankers Association is behind me and is planning to testify. This bill raises the amount of money a bank can loan to a single borrower and shortens the de novo status period for new banks. And I would ask that you hold questions for the folks who are testifying after me.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Thank you, Senator Ricciardi, and thank you for covering for me last session. I appreciate that. It's all right. We've got it covered. Well, Senator, I just introduced your bill. Do you want to reintroduce it? All right, let's go. And
This is
then we'll have
85,
Christy
right?
Merrill to follow you.
My apologies, I get delayed in energy and
It's okay. We understand.
We are doing 85. right?
There's a lot going on. Yes,
All right.
85.
Thank you. Well, good morning, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Senator Howard Pearl from Loudon, representing District 17. And I am here to introduce Senate Bill 85. So Senate Bill 85 is being introduced at the request of the New Hampshire Bankers Association. It makes two key changes. The bill raises the legal lending limit for New Hampshire chartered banks from 15 to 20% of capital, with an option to increase to 25% if the additional 5% is fully secured. Currently, these banks can lend only up to 15% of their capital to any single customer. This change will bring New Hampshire into greater alignment with the other jurisdictions. Second thing, Senate Bill 85 aligns New Hampshire's de novo period with the FDIC standard. The de novo period is the initial phase for newly chartered banks during which they undergo heightened regulatory scrutiny from both the FDIC and the New Hampshire Banking Department. Currently, New Hampshire's de novo period is 5 years, while the FDIC's is 3. Senate Bill 85 changes New Hampshire's period to 3 years for consistency. Additionally, the bill includes an amendment resulting from collaboration between the New Hampshire Bankers Association and the Banking Department. And I know we have some members of the Banking Department here, so I'm going to let you ask their technical questions to them. But I think this should be a great bill for New Hampshire and bringing us in alignment with our neighbors on the lending capacity, and I think it would be very beneficial to the banks here in New Hampshire. You know, we're a very small business community, and the small business banks are also something that we want to make sure we're welcoming. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce the bill, and my
Thank you,
apologies
sir.
again for being late.
That's all right. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. So Christy Merrill, would you like to join us, please?
Good
morning.
morning, Chairman Innes and honorable members of the Senate Commerce Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 85. For the record, my name is Christy Merrill, and I have the honor and pleasure of serving as President and CEO of the New Hampshire Bankers Association. We represent 40 member banks who employ approximately 6,000 individuals across our state. I would like to thank Senator Pearl for sponsoring this legislation and also the Banking Department for working with us on this and to refine the language as well. As you know, we have a very strong economy in New Hampshire and we have a wonderfully diverse banking system. This legislation will continue to make our banking industry strong and attractive. And the real beneficiary are the bank's customers and New Hampshire citizens. So Senator Pearl talked about what the bill does at a high level, and so I'm just going to talk about why this legislation is important for the banking industry. So as was mentioned, the bill increases the current legal lending limit. So as he said, New Hampshire charter banks can lend up to 15% of their capital to a single borrower. But out-of-state banks that do business here can lend up to 20%. In particular, Maine, Vermont, and Massachusetts, their states all allow lending up to 20%. Further, our legal counsel did research of legal lending limits across the country and found that 44 states have a legal lending limit of 20% or more, and 32 states provide a limit of 25% or more. This puts New Hampshire banks at a competitive disadvantage when competing for business. What practically happens is when banks start to approach the 15% cap, they have to have, in some instances, they'll have to have a financial partner to get that deal done. And in that case, they'll work with a partner that is out of state because, as you can imagine, if you're a bank and you're working with a customer and you can't quite cover that whole loan, you're not going to want to work with your competition to go in on the deal, right? So you're going to work with another bank, and oftentimes our members will tell us that they work with a bank that's located out of state. And this legislation would really be the most impactful to our smallest banks. As we said, this is really laying the playing field for New Hampshire charter banks. We're very fortunate because we have Maine banks, New Hampshire banks, Vermont banks, and Massachusetts banks doing business here. But where the inequity lies is if these multiple banks were to go in on the same deal, even if they had were the same size, a New Hampshire bank would be able to do less than an out-of-state bank. So we're really just trying to put that in alignment. So regarding the de novo period, as was mentioned, it changes the de novo period from 5 years to 3 years. And it aligns us to make New Hampshire attractive. We're really fortunate because nationally there has been a lot of consolidation in the industry. From 1990 to 2008, we had 100 banks per year that were created. From 2009 to 2023, there were a total of 95 banks across the country that were created. So you're really not seeing the creation of new banks. However, in New Hampshire, we've been a little bit of a bright spot because since 2007, we've had 4 de novo banks. And I think that that's a really good thing for our economy. And I think it speaks well of the banking industry here. And we want to be intentional to maintain that banking environment here in New Hampshire. And I don't know if you all have an amendment. I believe there was one that was been proposed. We are in support of it. We worked with the banking department, as Senator Pearl mentioned. So we are supportive of that. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Are
Thank
there
you
any
all.
questions? Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So federal banks will still stay at 15% of their capital, so it'll give New Hampshire chartered banks a little advantage over a federal bank that may be next door.
Yes, although federal banks have that ability to go up even higher as well. But yes, this primarily makes a change for New Hampshire banks.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Merrill. Appreciate it
you.
very much. We have Seth Zaracki and Josh Hips from the New Hampshire Banking Department to talk about their neutrality, I assume. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Ennis. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Seth Zaracki. I'm the General Counsel at the New Hampshire Banking Department. With me is Josh Hips, who's my colleague and also an attorney at the Banking Department. First, let me say that we at the Banking Department appreciate the outreach and collaboration from the New Hampshire Bankers Association on this bill. As Ms. Merrill stated, we work together with the Bankers Association on the amendments to the bill that I believe have been presented to the committee. Based on those amendments, the Bank Commissioner has no concerns with this bill, assuming those referenced amendments are incorporated into it. Just a few notes on the substance of the bill, much of which has been already stated before me, I think. But first, with respect to Section 1, it's important to understand that when a new New Hampshire state chartered bank wants to open for business, there's a detailed application process, and the organizers of the new bank need to obtain approvals at with both the New Hampshire Banking Department and with the FDIC at the federal level. The amendments in Section 1 are designed to ensure alignment of the application requirements at the state level with those application requirements at the federal level. In our experience, this streamlines the application process and allows for more efficient review of the application. Next, with respect to Section 3 of the bill, sometimes referred to as the legal lending limit, this statute places limitations on the bank's loans to one borrower. The purpose of this statute is to prevent excessive loans to one person or to related persons that are financially dependent, and to promote diversification of loans to banking services. We recognize that New Hampshire was a bit of an outlier compared to other states with respect to the lending limit, and the purpose of this amendment is to give our banks some increased flexibility and align our statute with the lending limit of the surrounding states. So again, we at the Banking Department have no concerns with this bill and happy to take any questions.
Okay, very good. Are there any questions? All right, appreciate both of you coming out. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 85? Seeing none, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 85, and we will commence with 163 in a moment. We'll see how time goes. If we get done with 399 early, we'll do that. This one has a lot of speakers. So let's see what we can do. All right, I'm going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 163 and welcome Senator Pearl again.
Good morning again, members of the Commerce Committee. For the record, my name is Senator Howard Pearl. I reside in the town of Loudon and represent the voters of District 17. I am here to introduce Senate Bill 163. So I am here today at the request of the New Hampshire Home Builders Association to introduce legislation that would prevent municipalities from imposing their own moratoriums on building permits. This bill aims to eliminate unnecessary barriers to addressing New Hampshire's housing crisis. While many communities are actively working to create attainable housing, others are resisting change, effectively shutting the door on new development. Solving this crisis requires an all-hands-on-deck approach, and we cannot afford roadblocks. So current New Hampshire law, RSA 674-23, allows towns to enact temporary moratoriums on building permits under very specific conditions. Public need, limited duration, public need, a moratorium must address urgent concerns related to public health, safety, or significant municipal issues. Second is limited duration. Moratoriums can last up to 1 year and may be extended with justification. Legislative approval, a public hearing is required before an enactment or as part of ongoing planning. Towns must actively work on solutions such as zoning revisions or infrastructure improvements. Now, after we put this bill in, and then I had some discussion with my colleagues, and I think we want to make a slight change to this bill, and I'm going to propose that the committee consider that. I have not drafted the language, but I'm happy to, or you could do it as a simple committee amendment.
That would be great.
Under Chapter 1, Section 3, I would propose adding exceptions to this repeal would be allowed if a municipality can provide data demonstrating a lack of water accessibility, because that was a concern that was raised in eliminating these moratoriums, and I think that change in language would fix it. So I appreciate your time and consideration, and New Hampshire home builders are here and available to answer questions as well. So
Okay.
thank you.
All right, any questions for Senator Pearl? All right, thank you, Senator. Appreciate it very much. Well, since you did the intro for him, we'll go to Matt Mayberry from the New Hampshire Home Builders.
Great opening act.
And then you're next, Brody.
Good almost afternoon, folks. Matt Mayberry from the New Hampshire Home Builders Association. I'm here to support SB 163, which prohibits local moratoriums and restrictions on building permits. And normally I'm a pretty optimistic guy, but this one I'm going to be direct. This bill is a direct response to a New Hampshire town where during a planning board hearing, officials publicly stated, maybe it's time we shut this all down and stop issuing building permits. These people are ruining our town. No action was taken at that moment, but that very same board later on, a few weeks later, blocked a proposed 40-unit workforce housing unit, housing for police officers, firefighters, teachers, and blue-collar workers. This project met all the zoning requirements and no variances were requested. But the town's justification, traffic concerns. And then the ever so favorite, preserving the rural character of our town. That town is probably going to be facing a lawsuit. Currently, RSA 674-23 allows towns to impose temporary building permit moratoriums for public safety, health, or significant municipal issues. This law originated when a Rockingham County town attempted to halt all residential construction in the early 80s. The town was sued and lost, but the officials admitted their real intent: delay development long enough so the builder will simply go away. I know that because I was working for that developer during that lawsuit. I'm old. Today, some planning board openly state that they don't want children in town because they don't want to build a school. Others prefer only 55+ communities. I'm not an attorney, but that smacks like discrimination on familial status and age. SB 163, with an amendment, as the Senator had mentioned, will allow for a development pause if a town can prove with data that there's insufficient water capacity. But subjective opinions should not dictate housing policies. The New Hampshire Municipal Association will argue that this is all about local control. But senators, please remember that New Hampshire is a Dillon rule state. Towns derive their authority from the state, not the other way around. Some planning boards believe that now that they live in town, they should shut the door behind them. The next move in that playbook, and I predict it right now, will be a full building permit moratorium. Senators, we need housing at all price points. This is a statewide issue. Please don't give the towns an off-ramp to avoid addressing it. Please support SB 163.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayberry. Any questions? Senator McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayberry. Thanks for bringing your testimony. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill.
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming that meeting that you're referring to was a public meeting?
It was a public meeting, yes.
What was the town?
Is that relevant, Senator?
Yes,
Okay.
sure, it was a public meeting. I mean, it must be on YouTube somewhere, right?
Londonderry.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Mayberry. Appreciate it. Rody Deshays. Welcome again.
This is the least forgiving one of all of them. Thank you for welcoming me back, Brody Deshays, New Hampshire Municipal Association. And yes, we are opposed to Senate Bill 163 as currently drafted. Senate Bill 163 would repeal and reenact RSA 674:23, which currently allows a municipality to establish a temporary moratorium on development. This temporary moratorium on development cannot be longer than 1 year and comes with several reporting requirements and things that are required in the ordinance, specifically under 674:23, Roman 3. The moratorium authority established under RSA 674:3 is a last resort remedy that was adopted in the 1980s when New Hampshire's population was exploding and many towns were unprepared to deal with it. Mainly, drafters of the original RSA municipalities were concerned that the increase in student population would cause their school taxes to balloon or the infrastructure costs of the municipalities to increase precipitously. There are times, although rare, when municipalities have an interest in establishing a short-term and temporary moratorium on development. Additionally, under RSA 674:23, Roman 3, subsection C, the moratorium cannot, again, last longer than a year, and there are stringent reporting requirements to the state. Our opinion is that this is not a very arbitrary statute. It's pretty clear why a municipality would adopt such an ordinance and when they would implement it, and there is some level of oversight. However, our biggest concern with the language of Senate Bill 163, aside from that loss of a community being able to pump the brakes and better prepare its infrastructure for further development, is the language in Senate Bill 163, the newly proposed 674:23, sections 1 and 2, if read literally, suggests that a municipality cannot place any restrictions on the granting of building permits or approval of subdivisions. We assume this is not what was meant and an oversight because the municipality must be able to deny a building permit or subdivision approval if the project would violate zoning ordinances, subdivision regulations, or building codes. So at a bare minimum, we would request that the committee amend the language so that it's clear that this, that's not what the bill intends to do. With that, I'll take any questions and appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you. Have you reached out to Senator Pearl on your proposed amendment?
I have not yet, no.
Okay. Well, I'd encourage you to have a discussion if you could. Are there any questions for Mr. Deshays? All right, very good. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Nice to see you this morning.
Yeah.
Thanks for spending the morning with us. All right. Chris Norwood from the Realtors would like to speak. Welcome back.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Chris Norwood again. I'm with the Realtors representing our 7,000 members, encouraging you to support SB 163. My testimony will be brief. I did, with our team's research, some towns that have instituted moratoriums and just thought I would just touch base on those. outside of our state. Wells, Maine just recently enacted one on single-family housing. I believe it was limited to single-family housing. The town of Croydon, just this past week, was exploring a one-year moratorium on subdivisions. There was the comments earlier by the town of Londonderry. Nothing was enacted, but there was a public meeting and a discussion. And you may be familiar, the town of Conway, not on housing particularly, but interestingly enough, on projects in excess of 50,000 square feet and also hotels along, I believe it was a portion of the Route 16 corridor. So originally, when we read this bill, my thinking was that perhaps, well, geez, there's no moratorium. I haven't heard about moratoriums since the 1980s and 90s, but the reality is there are moratoria taking place, and we feel it's a private property rights issue, and the town's ability to prohibit a private property owner to limit what they can do for a year or 2 years. When you kind of read some of the text about the reasoning for why, well, we need to update our master plan, or we're concerned about the number of, subdivisions that we've approved prior. So that's concerning because the town's inability to work on their master plan is now limiting someone else's private property rights. So we have a concern for it, and we support the bill as written, and happy to answer any questions.
All right. Are there any questions of Mr. Norwood? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank
for
you,
your
Mr. Chair.
testimony. Appreciate it. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 163? Seeing none, I will close the hearing. And in a few minutes, we will open the hearing on House Bill 399, the last bill for today. We will be going into executive session on 399. Right. No, only one speaker? All right. All right, I'm going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 399. We might be a minute early, but so be it. And I would like to welcome our good representative to present his bill.
Oh, thank you, Chairman Innes and Senators of Senate Commerce. For the record, my name is Joe Alexander. I represent the town of Goffstown. I'm also chairman of the House Housing Committee, although you now also have your own committee, so thank you for that. I put in this bill as the prime sponsor because I think when everything ages, there's always an opportunity to revisit and rework. I put in this bill, the legislative intent truly is to establish a commission to study the Zoning Enabling Act. It actually coincidentally has turned 100 this year, so I think 100 years has been enough time. I think the legislature should revisit different priorities that they have given powers to municipalities, and I think that this is an important bill to allow us to revisit as a legislature. On page 2, I had listed off, it looks like 10 questions that the legislative commission shall consider. I'm open to feedback if you think they should consider something different, but this is kind of what I came up with of things that should be considered. The only request that I have, if the Senate will indulge me, is the membership of the commission. I'm looking for an amendment that would reconfigure the appointing authority to give it back to the Speaker of the House in consultation with the majority and minority leaders, because the appointing authority of the House does come from the Speaker, and that was something that slipped my mind when it went through the House. So if you would be so kind to make that change, and then any other changes, I'm fully in support of.
We have Amendment 698S ready to go to correct that.
Sounds great. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
All right. Any questions for Representative Alexander? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm just bringing this to light. With the absence of space, with the transitions with the building, they have asked us to really not do too many commissions because we won't have the meeting space. I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I just want to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Senator. The House is also making it a priority of ours not to pass too many commissions as well, as space is an issue. But I believe strongly that this is an important one that we should move forward with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Representative. Appreciate it. Greg Moore from AFP New Hampshire would like to speak. Good morning, Mr. Moore.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. Here today to testify. For the record, my name is Greg Moore. I'm the regional director with Americans for Prosperity, and I'm here today to testify in support of House Bill 399. I think that to the sponsor's point, 100 years is enough time to review legislation to determine if it's working ineffectively. The fact that you have so many bills dealing with this section would seem to indicate that a comprehensive review of this entire process is timely and deservedly ready. And we think that this is an appropriate step. I think that the time frame, which basically forces the legislature to get moving, is appropriate. I think some of the changes in the House that make this more of a bipartisan bill are appropriate as well, because I think we all know that you're not going to get a comprehensive rewrite of the Housing Enabling Act with just Republican or just Democrat votes. It's going to have to be a bipartisan process. I do have, just from a mechanical perspective, some things that the committee might want to think about, and that is on page 1, lines 21, 23, and 25. There are people being non-member people being added to the commission. So in national housing experts, a representative from the municipal, and a member of the public being added to the commission. The concern I have is when you have people jointly appointing those people. Well, what happens if the Senate president and the minority leader disagree? Does the commission just not take place because you can't fill? And so I think that you might want to think through that process of how we want to actually do the appointing, because two people can't appoint. I hope we all hope for the best of intentions, and we hope that everybody works closely together and gets it done. But I do have some just mechanical concerns. Senator Murphy might remember that I used to work for a House Speaker who didn't exactly always, I'll just say charitably, didn't always see eye to eye with the minority leader at the time. So I just have that one concern, and that's one thing I would bring to the committee's attention that you might want to think through, is that someone has to do the appointing. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
All right. Are there any questions for Mr. Moore? Seeing none, thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 399? Seeing none, I will close the hearing on 399. We're going to take a 2-minute recess so the chair can I'll pull us out of recess, and I would entertain a motion to go into executive session, please. All right, we have a motion from Senator Murphy, a second from Senator Reardon. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, House Bill 399. I'd like to take action on this one this morning. And it looks like we'll get it done this morning. The bill we just heard. And there are a couple of amendments to this, and I'm going to request also a committee amendment. And let me begin with the first amendment, which is 698S. You should find that in your binder or your folder, depending on your preferred style. And this addresses the issue that the representative brought forward with the appointments to the committee that was also discussed by Mr. Moore. This is pretty typical of the way we do it, and we wanted to bring the bill in line with the standard approach. The second amendment is 0668S, and this one is somewhat germane. Goes back to the C-PACER bill, which the governor signed just last week, and I will take part of the blame for this. We need a different effective date. I should have caught that. The BFA should have caught it, but neither of us did. And this bill corrects that date upon passage from November 1st of 2026. So, or I think that's where we had it, somewhere out in the future. So this brings it to the present. And then finally, the committee amendment would be, if you look at the original bill, lines 21 and 22, we need to insert or change that line to say municipality means any city, town, unincorporated town, unorganized place, or village district within the state. And again, that's consistent with the language we normally use to define a municipality, but it wasn't included in the way that it probably should have been. So that's a relatively simple committee amendment. All right, so I would entertain a motion of ought to pass on House Bill 399. All right, we have a motion from Senator Reardon. I will second that. Yes, sir. I would be happy to do that if we could do so. Any formal process to that? Do we vote on that, or do we just do that?
As long as everyone's fine with it.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Is there discussion on that proposal that we combine all three into one? And, all right, so I trust OLS will take care of that once we get it passed out of here. Okay. Any discussion on the combined amendments? Well, we need to move them, right? So, we need to move them individually?
Yeah, just
Move them collectively. All right, I'm going to do that. I will move all three amendments, the two amendments that we have and the committee amendment combined into one. And I would suggest ought to pass. We have a second from Senator Reardon. Any discussion? All right, the first vote will be on the combined amendment. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Next up is the bill itself, House Bill 399. Any discussion before we move forward? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. I will move consent. Yes, no? We need to discuss this one. That's right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I need these two guys to keep me on track. So thank you, Mr. Bossy. Thank you, Mr. Jones. All right. Yeah, please. It's executive session, right?
That it is.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Grant Bossy, Deputy Chief of Staff, New Hampshire Senate. The reason we are asking you not to put this on consent, we intend to move it early in the morning, just after Senator Fenton's bill, because he's got some guests coming. We're going to then move this bill and immediately adopt the third reading motion.
Gotcha.
We can't do it if it is on consent. The idea would be to get it to the House.
Understood.
Because it's a House bill, they can immediately concur and get the bill to the governor possibly as early as Thursday.
Okay, great. This is the first time I've been through this particular process, so thank you both for helping me to get it right. All right, is there anything else while we're in executive session? Yeah. I will take this one out. All right. Motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
All right, I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn? Yeah. Oh, sign that, bills. Yes, there are some bills we need to move to
The special housing.
the Housing Committee, and those bills are as follows. Senate Bill 90, Senate Bill 163, Senate Bill 174, and Senate Bill 175. All right. Any further business? Seeing none, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much. Very effective day.